Okay, we're gonna get this show on the road. Tonight, you're stuck with James and Pearce Stickney talking about South Africa, which I actually do like South Africa a lot, and probably should know a lot more about South Africa than I really do. But we're probably equipped to answer most questions. And then the best part is at the end, you get to watch my brother either be a hero or embarrass himself, which is going to be a lot of fun.
Or heroically embarrass himself.
That's also an embarrass himself. Yeah, so we're going to kind of break this into a couple of different sections where Pearce and probably myself will talk about South Africa kind of as a whole, and it's got a cool history, and we can answer any questions on that. And then I represent Morgenster in part of the area here, and I'll talk about them a little bit, even though I represent them. I know maybe not as much as I'd like, but they have a real cool history, so we'll go over that as well. And so yeah, I guess I'll let Pearce start here with a little bit of the history of South African wine.
Okay, so South Africa is sort of in this weird limbo where it's known predominantly as, or kind of lumped in predominantly with a lot of the New World wine regions, but it's old. It's really old. So it originally started from the Dutch East India Trade Company, the Dutch kind of going around getting in everybody's business. South Africa and the Cape were used as a supply trade post. So there was a large population of sailors, and it was a place that they stopped over. So of course there was going to be alcohol production and heavy drinking going on. So the wine for a really long time wasn't particularly good or impressive, but there was a person named Simon van der Stel who kind of started to get into viticulture and was, I believe, a monk. If I remember right.
I actually don't remember.
But he started producing dessert wine from Muscat of Alexandria, which is a pretty common white grape varietal all over the world, especially in dessert wines and fortified wines. And he was world renowned for it. It was called Constantia, which you may be familiar with. There's also a ward.
There's a district named after it.
District named Constantia that's named after the famous dessert wine. And it was popularized in the 1700s.
States does, that's right.
And yeah, and has been carried through, and the style is actually kind of making a return. Dessert wine obviously being a little bit less popular than it was formerly. But it was known to be one of Napoleon's favorite wines. He was probably their most famous drinker of it. But
how much more famous can you get?
Yeah,
there's
more
right?
famous than Napoleon.
Yeah.
After this wine tasting, who knows? So it's that was kind of the main thing. And then after there was a lot of political upheaval in South Africa, which kind of plummeted their wine production into a little bit of a bad spot. So for about 200 years, they were pretty quiet. Not much quality wine of note came from South Africa. And so it really kind of fell off up until around 1994 was the big turning point when the KWV was overturned. So I'll kind of go into a little bit of history around what the KWV is. So South Africa has a number of viticultural and vine diseases that they have challenges with up to this day. But originally, the big thing that came through is they were for many years producing just bulk grapes and turning it into brandy, and that was basically a government thing. There was no individual wineries making wine. If there was wine being produced, it was by the government through a cooperative called the KWV. Let me see. I have some notes on what exactly they were doing.
They were making a lot of brandy.
Mm-hmm.
South Africa drank a lot of brandy for a long time.
Mm-hmm. I lost my notes. Hang on.
They probably should have kept making some of it. I bet some of it was good.
Yes, I believe it.
And this cooperative scheme kind of forced by the government isn't necessarily unique to South Africa. It's something that Nama didn't get into the other night, but that's happened in Portugal as well as Spain a little bit. And while I suspect the Portuguese were maybe much more into breaking the rules than the South Africans were, that kind of kept their industry a little bit more afloat than maybe here in South Africa.
So the KWV was basically responsible for producing the majority of quality conscious wine. Let's see, hang on. I just lost my notes again. Hang on. Sorry.
Basically 1 year ago today, Pearce took his final exam on his last thing, and if you had caught him right then, you'd have been able to bust this out.
I would have been able to talk about it for the whole time. That's weird. Apparently didn't record that. The KWV was basically responsible for controlling everything in the vineyard for a producer. So there were a lot of autonomous grape growers, but none of them had any decision-making power. They were told how much they were supposed to grow. They were told how much they were supposed to water. They were told basically everything from the ground up, which basically led to a very large production, but a very poor quality in general. So as recently as 1990, less than 30% of the harvest reached the market as wine. And that is, let's see, so South Africa current numbers are 1.7% of the world's vineyards, but they're 11th in area under vine, to give you an idea. So they have a pretty large amount of viticultural area, but from a vineyard and winemaking standpoint, they're a really, really small percentage. So a ton of that was going around into just straight to brandy. To give you guys in Washington an idea, 3,400, just a little over 3,400 vine growers are in South Africa. So a huge number of people actually doing this. Okay, back to my other notes.
3,400
in South Africa.
Interesting. So it's like probably almost 3.5 or 4 times what we have here.
Mm-hmm. So on a less historical note and kind of getting into modern history. So 1994, things kind of started to change politically in Africa, or South Africa. Apartheid had a major impact on what things look like from an export and production quality standpoint, or quantity standpoint, I should say. So do you kind of have anything to add on what that looked like, just specifically?
Just the politics of it?
Mm-hmm.
No, I mean, that pretty much covers it. I mean, it was, I don't want to say it was like, it was almost communist in the way they were run. Just like Zaza talked about in the last one, where, you just were kind of told what you had to do, like Pearce was alluding to. And then that was just the expectation. The idea was not to make quality wine. That wasn't what they were doing. They were trying to get enough supply out there to keep everybody drunk and happy, really.
Yeah, I think ultimately that's true. So since 1990, or between 1992 and 2012, there was a 20-fold increase in wine production. So it's been a booming industry. But poor grape quality, often due to virus-infected planting material, has hindered even greater progress. They basically have every viral infection that is commonly known in the wine world. So they have leaf roll, they have fan leaf, they have corky bark viruses, and all of those can kill vines. And at the very minimum, they decrease production of quality grapes by massive amounts. So,
and it all started with phylloxera.
And it all started with phylloxera, which I don't think we've talked about.
No, maybe not.
Much.
Maybe we should just.
So, to give you just a kind of a very, very brief history of phylloxera, because it's been around for a long time. So back when the Americas were colonized by the British, and plant materials kind of started to get taken back from the United States. When that happened, there were grapes here, which are a different genus than the Vitis vinifera wine grapes. So we have Vitis lubrusca, which is basically your common table grape, Concords and things like that. When those got brought back, they unintentionally brought back a root louse called Phylloxera, which the American vines have a resistance to. Basically the sap is really, really thick in the American vines, and so the root louse, they don't like it. Their mouth gets clogged up. They don't enjoy that process at all, and so prevents them from infecting those grapes. However, Vitis vinifera, the European grapevines, were completely susceptible to it, and it has been basically, it at one point had wiped out almost all of the grapevines in Europe. There are still a few pre-Phylloxera vineyards that rootstocks are still, original plantings, but very, very few still remain today. So Phylloxera has been this kind of...
How long? Do you remember what period of time that was? It was over like about 60 or 80 years that it kind of went from, it kind of started in France and spread its way through all of Europe.
Yeah, and it was bad, and still is problematic here today. They actually found like the first Phylloxera infected vines in Walla Walla. We have some different soils, and Phylloxera are prone to be more problematic in certain soils, and they hadn't made an impact here, but they just kind of started popping up in Walla Walla this last year. So it'll be an issue now that we know how to deal with them. A lot of it can be dealt with replanting and just basically grafting vines onto different rootstocks.
Which was the solution back in the 1800s. Yep. They figured that out relatively quickly. That an American figured out, I think he's from Texas, that you could graft the Vitis vinifera grapes, so your Chardonnay and Cab Sauv and all those, onto an American rootstock and make it so it would resist Phylloxera. And there's still a few areas of the world that have escaped it. Chile is Phylloxera free, and that's in large part due to like the physical barriers. They have a huge ocean and a huge mountain range on either side. Argentina on the other side has had problems with it, but Chile hasn't. And then Australia has very strict quarantine measures, and they've dodged it in large part as well. Let's see, what was the question here? I had one here. It's an interesting thing, right? It actually can help the taste in some ways, because it limits the production of the vine. The problem is it does that for a couple of years and then the vine's dead. So
there are, and I've actually talked about this with some winemakers. So the thing that's kind of tricky about wine grapes and vines is a lot of the time lower yields aren't necessarily a bad thing. So you have certain viral diseases that don't necessarily kill a vine, but infect it and cause it to kind of slow down production, and that can actually create a better wine in a certain way, because it creates a more concentrated cluster of grapes. So it doesn't try and grow as vigorously because it's kind of fighting off this viral disease. One of the interesting ways that a winemaker described it to me at one point is, the reason people like old vines, and old vines are good, the sort of, it's attractive because the vineyards have been there for so long, and it sounds really nice to have the history there. But one of those things is that old vines, the production slows down as they age, but also they're most often infected with some sort of a viral disease, not necessarily anything that will kill it, but it prevents it from really spiking carbohydrates and things like that. So it's not as efficient. It doesn't convert sugars as quickly. So it gives a longer, kind of more balanced growing season to the grapes, which it's kind of a weird thing. And
it's harder to artificially produce that, right? You can, lots of people would call me crazy, but there's a number of winemakers, again, that we've talked to that have discussed being able to make very high quality wine from very young grapes. Just the management part of it is much more intensive.
You have to be very, very disciplined on how you manage those vines early on and when they're young, because they want to produce all the fruit and all of the leaves. They're rearing to go,
just like humans.
So to give you guys a kind of a rough idea, Cabernet Sauvignon is the #1 most planted red grape in South Africa. They have about 30,000 acres, give or take a few thousand either direction. But yeah, they've made kind of a name for themselves as far as international grape varietals go. That's the one that they've really banked on. They have right behind that, Syrah is also planted heavily with 25,500 acres, give or take. These numbers are from 2011, but that's the most recent I could find without going on their website. Right behind that is the signature grape varietal of South Africa. So it's less planted because it's harder to sell, but it's called Pinotage. Pinotage is a very divisive grape. They made it in South Africa. What they were trying to do was produce a hybrid grape varietal that would effectively handle heat very well, but still be delicate and kind of really develop some nice elegant flavors. They didn't quite succeed with that, but they crossed Pinot Noir and Cinsault. So a Southern Rhone grape varietal and a Burgundian grape varietal. And it offers some really interesting characters. I think we're actually kind of at the beginning of seeing what Pinotage is capable of from a fine wine perspective. Historically, because of South Africa's temptation to overproduce, they were making a lot of it, and it was kind of poor quality. And Pinotage gets a really aggressive burnt rubber smell when you make it not very well. Yeah, it is unattractive. It's very easy to point out in a blind tasting, but it smells like somebody slammed on their brakes really hard or burnt clutch. Yeah.
Bizarre smell.
Or if you use your eraser a lot during an exam, you're like, it smells like Pinotage. Yeah, it's a really, really kind of a divisive grape.
Can be beautiful.
I would say there are some brilliant examples of Pinotage. As with any wine, I think a lot of the poor quality examples that get overproduced and sent out are not the ones that really should be kind of the thing making the name for it. The challenge is they weren't necessarily exporting the super high quality ones. They were keeping them in the country and drinking them because they were good. So now that's kind of turning around and things, better quality examples are getting out. It's beginning to be much more appreciated. It's often blended with Syrah. So it has a really big red fruit character, and kind of Syrah like tendencies,
the smoky meaty characters that Syrah kind of has,
but with juicy raspberry and blueberry, and it can be really, really interesting. So behind that is Merlot, with around 15,000 acres planted. I won't go too far into any of that. And then from their white wine perspective, we'll just skim over those. So Chenin Blanc is their number one most planted white varietal. It's actually their number one most planted varietal, partially because it's one of the ones that's made into a lot of brandy. But they have about 42,000 acres of Chenin Blanc planted. It is also called Steen there, Steen. It's a lot more charming when a South African person says it. So I don't know. That's just kind of characteristic there. They have
a lot of their white varietals were planted with the intention of brandy, because most white varietals have a tendency to be really vigorous compared to their red counterparts, and so they ended up with a lot of white varietals left over after kind of transitioning out.
Yeah, they're also a little bit less picky to get fully ripe. You can kind of plant them virtually anywhere. It's really interesting. I haven't been to South Africa, so I'm kind of going off of pictures and maps and things. But the vineyards, they go all the way into Cape Town. Some of their largest production regions are around Cape Town and on the Cape there. So it's very influenced by the climate and the water being so close. And it is important to remember that once you get away from the water there, it gets really, really hot really fast. So it's easy to produce a ton of grapes in that area, but it can be challenging to produce high quality ones. So that's just kind of something to look at. If you get a chance to look at pictures of South Africa and the vineyards there, they're gorgeous. Their second most planted white grape varietal is Colombard. which is effectively a bulk grape for the most part from France that is actually used in brandy production often.
It makes cognac. They use it in
cognac. Sauvignon Blanc, they have around 23,000 acres planted, and then Chardonnay, they have a lot as well. So the Sauvignon Blanc is typically produced in kind of that New Zealand kind of fresher, fruitier style.
Morgenster makes a beautiful one of those as well.
They do. The super cool thing about getting south of the equator whites is that Sauvignon Blanc will be the 2020 harvest. That'll probably be up here in a couple months. Yeah. So because they're harvesting in April. So that's going to be one of those things where we'll start to see some of those pop up here pretty soon. And Morgenster is usually the first one on the waters for us. Now it might be a little bit weird with COVID.
Morgenster probably won't be this year due to the way they will sell alcohol, but
or not.
Hillerston will beat them this year. That's my guess.
Probably. So yeah, any kind of questions off of just kind of the basic overview of South Africa and South African wine?
Nope. You did it all.
I covered everything. It's amazing. I would have failed an exam.
You would have failed an exam. Me too, though. Okay, well, I guess I'll go into Morgenster a little bit here. They, like South Africa, are really old. I don't either. The answers I don't know. You're gonna look that up real quick?
Yeah, I
am. So yeah, Morgenster is really old. As an estate, they've been around.
Rugby.
What's that?
Rugby. They're probably all sick. They suck.
They've been around since 1786, so they have a few years under their belt, and it's one of those cool things that there are really, like you said, there really aren't any new world regions that have this long growing history that South Africa has, and Morgenster has kind of taken advantage of that. They haven't been owned by the same people the whole time. And probably, some of that probably has to do with some of the politics at play here. But they were bought by the current family that owns them in 92 by an Italian gentleman, Giulio Bertrand. And apparently he was a fashion mogul. I've never had the pleasure of talking to him, but I believe his family still is fairly influential back in Italy doing that. He, however, passed away in 2018, but his two daughters have taken over since then and have basically chosen to essentially continue his vision, which I would be hard not to I think if you were one of the children, because the estate's gorgeous. They do grapes, but they also have a very large olive production, so they do a lot of work with olive products, it's just, South Africa is a gorgeous place, and it's one place I would very much like to go. Our winemaker was going to be going on safari, as well as visiting a number of wineries in September, but not sure that's going to happen.
I forgot.
Uh-oh.
I forgot to tell you guys how unbelievably confusing the breakdown of their grape growing regions is.
It's bad.
So like, people get confused about the vineyard designations of Burgundy and Bordeaux and all of that.
And even here.
Even at our level, people are like, South Africa has it broken down so you can be basically a geographical unit, which fits inside of a region, which fits inside of a district, which it starts at the smallest is a state, which is a vineyard. A vineyard fits inside of a ward fits inside of a district fits inside of a region, and a region fits inside of a geographical unit. It is impossibly confusing because they have about 30 different ones of each, and with wards they get into the low hundreds
It's California. They do that kind of stuff in California.
It's horrible.
Every place is cool, so we'll call it something different.
Yeah. So you can hear people talk about the Western Cape, which is the biggest geographical unit in South Africa. Then followed by your regions, which are like the coastal region, Olifants River, Klein Karoo, things like that. Then you'll break down into districts, which are Walker Bay. These are the most common ones that you'll hear. Let's see, Elgin, Stellenbosch is probably the biggest one, and that's where Morgenster is. And then you'll get into wards and estates, and there are many.
So to put that in perspective, the state of Washington, which is not a small growing region, but we have 14 now.
Yeah, I think 15.
15. So 15. We are a little bit more specific or careless. I'm not sure which. But anyways, back to Morgenster. So the daughters took, no, it's fine. The daughters took over and are running it for the last several years. They've stuck pretty much to the Bordeaux varietals that have been traditionally very popular and do really well in the area Pearce was talking about, Stellenbosch. But because they are Italian, and Italians very much like their grapes, they have started planting some Italian grapes in the last few years, Nebbiolo, Sangiovese, Vermentino, some things like that, to try and see how those do. My guess is there will be some mixed results, but probably will do decently well. Morgenster as a whole is fairly influential in South African wine, and part of that has to do with how long they've been around, and part of that has to do with, I think, the money that they kind of brought into the area when they did, where it was still, he was talking 94 is when things started changing. And this guy came in 92 and just redid everything, and so he probably was able to get it cheap, but he spent a lot of money on his estate to make it one of the more prominent estates, and that's kind of helping in the prominence. And then I don't know if this came when he lived in Europe or kind of after he kind of sought this person out, but Chateau Cheval Blanc, which is a Bright Bake estate in Bordeaux, it's one of probably the 3 or 4 most famous on that part of the world. It's probably one of the 10 or 12 most famous chateaus in Bordeaux for sure. Yeah. But I don't know if he paid or if they were friends, and he was able to talk their winemaker Pierre Latour into coming and being their consultant winemaker. And so I think that played a role in bringing Morgenster to prominence, that it gave them credibility from an export standpoint, and they are a very export heavy house. Outside of that, they're also in the most famous area in Stellenbosch, which is just they're about 20 miles outside of Cape Town, so they're right around a population center. They're right around where it's easy to get things out to the rest of the world, and they make good wine. They, from a nerd standpoint, they kind of have these mountains they're around that most people are probably somewhat familiar with. I think it's Table Mountain there, but they have these mountains, and they're old, and they're granite and sandstone, and these have been breaking down, so the soils are largely composed of these things, and they happen to be very good soils to produce wine in. And so these houses, but especially Morgenster, have taken advantage of being able to do that and produce Bordeaux varieties with a soil that retains heat, but is also largely influenced by these coastal areas like False Bay, which is very close. And they also are helped a lot by one of the currents that rolls through there, the Benguela current, which helps to moderate the temperature as well. So they have a climate that very much matches that of Bordeaux, where Bordeaux is right on the coast as well and has a lot of maritime influence, but gets relatively warm. But like Pearce said, as you go inland, it gets really hot. It's a desert, and you basically have to be around one of the rivers to produce grapes there. But they, just like Australia, do that.
One of the I always found it interesting. One of the winds that they have that comes through and blows through the vineyards really aggressively on the Cape there is called the Cape Doctor, because it just helps keep basically all of the moisture and pests away from the grapes. And it's caused largely by the Benguela current there.
Yeah, and they also have one that they call that in Western Australia as well. And I think it tends to be it's the same thing. They get their winds rip down there because south of Cape Town and south of like Perth, there isn't any land mass to slow the wind down. So when they get some of these big windstorms that come through, they can be pretty influential in the vineyards. From a production standpoint, the grapes that we bring in from Morgenster are Cab Sauv, Cab Franc, Sauvignon Blanc, and they have a blend that they call Lawrence River Valley. That's kind of one of their reserve labels. We have their 2010. It's a great wine. I think it's starting to reach its peak, but it's one I've sold a lot of, and I really enjoy personally. South Africa, if any of you guys were watching when I did my blind taste last time, I got fooled into it being an old world wine, and you get this on this Cab Franc where you get this, we kind of describe it as funky. We kind of describe it as funky notes. It can smell almost like cheesy in a way, but predominantly kind of things that I get and like about the Cab Franc are it's kind of smoky and
it has that green bell pepper.
Yeah, herbaceous. It's got they'll refer to sometimes as pyrazines, but it can be green bell pepper or hold on one second here. I mean, I have to take that away from you. Green bell pepper, and you find those in Sauvignon Blanc characters as well, which makes a lot of sense. When you taste one out of the Loire Valley, and then you get them in Cab Sauv, which makes also a lot of sense because Cab Franc and Sauvignon Blanc were the parents of Cab Sauv. So you get some of these characters that kind of meld into that wine out of both of these. Yeah, and then you get some kind of red fruit and plummy characters. Nice wine. I think they do a really nice job for the price that we were able to bring it in all the way from South Africa. Kind of like Hillerson. To be able to ship a wine basically halfway around the world and still be able to sell it for $12 or $13 is pretty impressive.
Sure. So
go ahead.
Bob asked if we could include some pictures, and I don't have any that I can at the moment.
Let me see if I can figure out how to do that here really quickly. Yeah.
Let's see. Just a really picturesque place.
It is. I don't know if it'll let me do it this way, but let's find out.
Don't. Go over there and lay down.
Go get on your bed. Emmy. Go get on your bed.
Nope, that didn't do it.
She's like, I want to go over and lift Pierce's leg.
Well, if anybody wants to look, we'll just do it this way. You can go to morgensterestate.co.za, and that will give you a couple of pictures that you can kind of look through there. It's a cool spot. I would very much like to go to South Africa. I mean, I wanted to do that even before wine, but wines made me want to go more. They do a really nice job from a quality standpoint now, really only having been able to do it for really for the most part less time than Washington has been able to do it, even though they've been growing for 300 years. So I guess I'll kind of leave it there. Make sure I didn't miss any questions there.
By the way, I looked. The Springboks won 47-14 on their last game, which was March 15th. So they're pretty good this year.
Professional opinion.
Professional opinion.
Yeah, great soil is not much organic matter. It's one of those weird things where usually you want organic matter to help your plants grow, but in wine you really don't. It's not that you can't produce good wines, but you have to work so much harder to produce good wines in those very rich soils. So I guess with that, I'm going to kind of let Pearce do his blind tasting here. As some of you know, and helped out, we picked 3 wines for him out of, I think, the 6 that I threw out there, and they're very, very pretty. We'll look at them here. There's 1 white and 2 reds, and I'll kind of let Pearce go through it. Pearce and I are, I would say, are both fairly good tasters, but we have very different styles in how we taste. In that I try and memorize every single fact I possibly can, and then I reason my way through it like a puzzle. And Pearce kind of maybe does it almost the opposite of the way I do it, where he
we came at it from totally 2 different perspectives. I've always intuitively been a good taster. And oftentimes, even when we're kind of towards the beginning, I could tell you what grape it was or what it was. And then he would say, okay, cool. Why do you think it's that? And I'm like, oh no.
Because on an exam, you have to be able to defend why you think it's that, right?
And the vast majority of your points, we kind of went through the tasting grid before, and how you can kind of deductively reason your way to a wine. The vast majority of the points come from being able to identify characteristics accurately. And then, a couple points come from being able to identify what the grape is. So if you say, yeah, this is absolutely definitely a Cabernet Sauvignon, it's from this Bordeaux Chateau, and they're like, yes, that's absolutely right. And you said it was neon violet with, flavors of pizza crust, they would be like, yeah, you get no points for that. So yeah, it's really it's about for me, it was developing the ability to reason my way to what the actual answer is, as opposed to kind of intuitively guessing based on the fact that I know in my gut. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Please drop that in a tasting. If you go wine tasting, go into a tasting room, you will watch the face on the person at the counter just drop. Like, you'll be like, no.
It's kind of fun to mess with people every now.
I like doing it, especially when they don't know that I do this professionally. People are like, you must be some kind of idiot. And I'm like, yeah, I am. It's true. Okay, so I guess I'm gonna kind of take you guys through this process. Thank you for joining me on this journey. I like to take notes during my tasting process, so this might not be the most entertaining moment for you guys, but I'll try and talk you through it as I go, just to kind of, my process is not a vocal one, so I'll take you guys along for the ride as much as I can. So I'm going to start with the white wine here. I deduced that with my eyes. On the nose, it's not super intense. Given it a pretty good swirl, it's not jumping out of the glass to me. So again, like we talked about, intensity is kind of based on how much the wine just really jumps out at you. This wine, I'd say, is kind of a medium intensity. It's not really depressed. It's there. I can smell things, but it's not super out there. Like the Riesling that I gave James, you mean if you opened that in a different room, you'd be able to smell it. It's pretty intense. This one's kind of just there. It's very apple, lemon. I get some vanilla and toast, so some oak notes to it. Maybe like a little bit of a nutty character to it. Not too much else there. So that pretty much confirms my thought on the nose. The palate is dry, pretty high acidity. It's got a medium plus body. You're not supposed to laugh. Got a medium plus body. It's pretty big. It's kind of hot to me in alcohol. It's pretty expressive in that, especially on the back of the throat. The flavors, it's got a pronounced intensity of apple, lemon, and toast, which kind of confirms that nose character. The aromas were pretty straightforward. It's kind of got about a medium plus finish. So that points me with the winemaking and kind of the general style on this. I think this is a Chardonnay. I think that this is old world. It's pretty restrained on the oak, although it could be just a more restrained oak usage in the new world. I've had some Oregon Chardonnays that kind of present similar to this, but this seems like it's Burgundy to me. And I think we're based on the alcohol. I think that this is Southern Burgundy. So it's a little bit fuller bodied. It's a little bit bigger. Acid structure is not quite as intense. Leans a little bit more towards the citrus and not like really, really tart green apple. It's more of a rounded, almost like a baked apple. So I think this is a Southern Burgundy. I think this is probably near Meursault. And I'm maybe even going to say it's pretty good quality. So I'm going to say it's a kind of a Premier Cru vineyard, like Vera Classé.
Pretty close. It is
Pretty
Vera
close.
Classé.
Oh, I didn't give a vintage.
Far south of Meursault, more like in Macomb, but
yeah,
white Burgundy, southern area, not bad.
Okay, it was a 2016. I was gonna say a little older than that. I was gonna kind of land 2014, 2015. The nettiness scared me. That's okay. Okay,
It's a good one. I mean, it's a good one. It's one of those ones that it comes in around $20 and drinks more like a $40 one. So
yeah, it's a nice one. It's very good. Okay, this wine is red. So far, crushing it. I would say that this wine kind of lands in it's got a really interesting color, and I don't know if you guys can see it, but kind of up towards the light there, it's not super deep, and it's kind of what I would say is bricking a little bit, so it's developing a little bit of age and character in the color. Some of those pigments are falling out. That also indicates to me that this is a thin-skinned varietal. So this is something that doesn't necessarily lend itself to a really deep color. So like the Cabernet Franc that we're drinking tonight is a much, much deeper color in your glass, and it's much, I'd say, darker ruby, whereas this is kind of leaning a little bit more towards garnet to me. All right. Here we go. Okay, so this is kind of a medium intensity. I'm not getting a ton off of the nose. I'm getting like really like bright red fruit. It's kind of like crushed raspberries, maybe like a red cherry, dark red cherry.
I wonder what a crushed raspberry tastes like compared to a regular raspberry. There's just some.
It's different.
Not that much different.
A little bit. It's like try smelling a whole raspberry. It's not as smelling.
And then beat it up. Apparently, it's
crushed raspberries are different. Everybody go out and crush raspberries like right now. Support me. Tell James how wrong he is. I think what it is I've actually determined a certain smell, and I've neon crushed raspberry, absolutely.
Yeah.
And that to me smells like I verbalize it as crushed raspberries. It's probably not that.
So like fresh cut garden hose compared to regular.
That's kind of my
garden
fresh
hose.
cut garden. Yeah, it sounds a little bit less stupid than that, but yes, that's exactly what I mean. So I get some cherry. I get some dried herbs on this. So a little bit of like sage or herbs de Provence or like dried basil, things like that. And I get some floral notes. So there's some violet or rose petal going on here. Okay, I'm going to taste it. Oh boy. Okay. That wine has a lot of tannins, which is helpful to me because it indicates that it's probably only a couple of things. So it's dry, like bone dry, medium, I'd say high acidity, actually. I said, yeah. I think this is like high tannins. They're very gritty, very aggressive and very mouth coating. It's a kind of a medium body, high alcohol. This one is very good. I would say confirm that cherry and kind of raspberry and rose petal on the palate. This wine tastes like it's got some age on it. It's got like I'd say around a medium finish. So I think that this wine is a Nebbiolo. I think this is from northern Italy. The thing that leads me to that is the color that I showed you guys, and the kind of very garnet, kind of clear, very very pale color, and it is aggressive on the tannins and acid. It's very high and very very almost bracing. Really tasty. Not quite in my mind high enough quality to be a Barolo or a Barbaresco, and it doesn't present kind of the tar and really intense rose petal and aroma. This wine is a little bit more subdued on the nose. I think that this is probably a Lenge Nebbiolo, and I think that vintage-wise, it's not super old, but it definitely has some age. I'd say this is a 2012. Yeah.
Well, he's right on everything. It's a Giacomo Bicco Lenge Nebbiolo, but it's 2017. So
it's a 2017.
It's much newer than that.
Wow.
It's for anybody who doesn't or hasn't had the chance to experience Nebbiolo in the form of Barbaresco or Barolo. It's a really beautiful wine. One of my favorites.
Yeah, I would have sworn that was
definitely one of my father's favorites. They're a little pricey here and there, but definitely find your way into some of those and have it with food, and let it sit, let it be a little bit old. Because they're awesome wines. But
and decant it.
When he says it's one of this is a really fun wine to taste wine, because like you said, it's very pale in color for a red wine, and you'll never find essentially another red wine that's pale that punches you in the face like that wine does.
It's so intense.
It hits pretty hard. So it's a fun wine to drink, and I highly recommend getting out there and trying.
Yeah. So to give you an idea of the wines that I'm looking at, so this is the color of number 2. And this is the color of number 3. So it's like a deep, like almost inky black color as compared to the really light kind of pale garnet that we had. I'm a little upset about that vintage call. That's okay. All right.
Well, most people are not. It's pretty young to sell that wine.
It's very young to sell that wine. It's good though. Okay, on to wine number 3. This wine is red. It's a deep ruby. Still got quite a bit of blue pigmentation in it. Yeah. The nose, it's got kind of a medium plus nose. Definitely a lot darker fruit, so it's more in the plum, kind of dark cherry. There's some vanilla. That one was a 2017. Go. A little more kind of toast. Getting a whole lot off in the nose. My nose hasn't been working super well. I've had very bad allergies the last 2 days.
Whoa, yeah, dog. That's my favorite.
Mm-hmm. So on the palate, this one is dry. I'd say it has medium plus, kind of towing the line on high acidity. It's very full bodied. It's a big wine.
Don't get lost. For any of you guys who want to try blind tasting or learn how to do it, I would love to have you guys come try out any of these wines. I'll throw them out there for you guys. That way you can
Talk about that for a second. I'm stalling for time.
You see on the pressure all of a sudden. Uh-oh.
No, it's just that I don't want them to have to watch my thinking face.
Yeah, no, it's really fun. It's one of those things where you if you can see the label, you're like, I don't like that wine, or I love that wine, and all of a sudden you find when you taste things blind that maybe you don't like some grapes as much as you thought, and you like other grapes a lot more than you thought. I know that happened for me a lot, and so I would definitely love to share that with anybody who's interested in doing it. We'll just all bring a bottle and we'll taste wine. It's one of my favorite things to do. You should see it. He's writing these notes and he keeps going and he keeps crossing it out. He's like, moment of panic's coming here.
No, it's not.
The other two are pretty straightforward and lead you down kind of a path. And this one can be, but it's a little more ambiguous than the last two.
What? Why? Why are you doing that? Sorry, there's a dog licking my arm.
Yeah, Corey, you should definitely do it. Last, like with what Christmas Eve, I think Brandon went through like 7 Bordeaux's, and Eric went too, to prove he liked Bordeaux.
That's the best. When you're like, I'm gonna prove that I like a wine by drinking it a lot. Mm-hmm.
It's one of those things that it's what I found is there are basically examples of every single grape that I like and examples of every single grape that I dislike very much.
Mm-hmm. I haven't found a Retsina that I like yet.
So Retsina, if any of you aren't familiar, is a obscure Greek wine. Greece does make some really great wine, but Retsina is this concoction that's finished with and sealed with pine resin, and so it takes on this like, it basically tastes like a Christmas tree smells. And with some of their fruit, it can go pretty well, but it's pretty overwhelming in character. I know there's one producer in Oregon who still thinks it's fun to produce. I don't think he's correct, but
If he's having fun, that's great.
but if you're ever rolling to Bend to go skiing or taste beer, he's right on the way there. Okay, you ready?
Yeah, more or less. So I think that this wine is dry. It has, I'd say, medium plus acidity. It's full, very full bodied, like I said, high alcohol, high tannins. It's got kind of a medium plus intensity of this cherry, black cherry, blackberry, cedar, plum, kind of all very dark, dense fruits. Got kind of a, it's not super heavy on the oak. It seems, to me, it seems like we're in the New World. I think that this wine did see some oak, but it's pretty subtle. I'm not getting a lot of kind of typical characters that are off of an old world wine of this style. I think that this is, I want to say it's Cabernet Sauvignon. And I think that we're in Washington. But I'm not super married to that guess. I don't know, I'm kind of struggling on this wine. It's relatively young. It seems like it was very warm with the weather on this year. So I'm guessing it's probably 2015 or 2016 range. Yeah, that's kind of where I'm sitting.
Good news, it is Cab Sauv. Bad news is it's from the old world.
Darn.
So this one is this is a class growth Bordeaux.
Shoot. That's terrible.
I threw a really expensive wine at him.
Is this Brio de Cantenac Brown?
No, this is Chateau Cantemiro First. It's their Grand Vin.
This is their Grand Vin.
Yep.
It tastes pretty good.
It's a pretty good wine. It is 2015 though. He was right about that.
That's good. For one, I got the vintage. I didn't get anything else right. At least I got the cab right.
Yeah. So
I don't get a lot of the old world character.
No, it's really clean
fruit.
Yeah.
It's
so
nice.
yeah,
It's tasty.
it's nice. Drink class growth Bordeaux whenever you get a chance.
Yeah.
There's some really good ones out there. Their second wine, Allays de Cantemiro, is also a really, really nice one. And instead of about $80, I think it retails for like about $30. So
part of my challenge with this is I also so one of the tricks with blind tasting is, you've got some guardrails that you're tasting off of something that's going to lead you down a certain path. So you kind of always have this thought process of, they're not going to throw anything super, super weird at me. It's probably going to be a pretty classic representation of certain grapes or certain regions. And so you kind of have to limit your deductive reasoning to that. I also further biased myself against that pick by the fact that I didn't think James would throw an $80 wine at. So I kind of was like, I don't think he's going to give me anything that is that.
yeah.
So it's you can kind of trick yourself and talk yourself into some interesting things.
I think if I just tasted it, if I was tasting it, it was a totally reasonable thing. I think if there's anything that you missed in that one versus the other one is that there's so little oak on that wine that it'd be the exception in Washington instead of kind of the rule. You would get very little new oak on that.
Yeah, no, that's he's absolutely right. Like I said, I don't detect almost any effect of new oak on this wine. It seems like it was maybe almost entirely neutral oak in the production. I'm guessing maybe there was a very small amount. that went in, but it's a lot different. But yeah, beautiful wines.
Beautiful wine. So what would lead you to South Africa? So I kind of went through that when I tasted last time. So if you want to see me get fooled, you can see me get fooled by the South African one in that last video where we did it.
Episode 6.
Yeah, it was like the 6th one we did. It was the one that we did for Chateau Roques. But so Pearce threw a South African at me. And so I think I briefly kind of pointed that I thought it could be South African. And the things that kind of take me to South Africa is they oftentimes, I should say, not all, have generally this kind of very smoky and, like I said, almost funky character to them. And part of that comes from being a little less concerned about super sterile winemaking. So you get a little Brettanomyces on a lot of it. And I think that that's kind of a clue for South Africa, but it can also, unfortunately, be confused with Old World. So, it's like I said, it's a transition one. But yeah, so, you're also looking at a kind of a finite number of varietals that are exported out of South Africa. Cab Sauv, Cab Franc, Merlot, Syrah, and those can be grown anywhere. So identifying South Africa can be challenging, but you want to look for New World winemaking style with kind of Old World aromas, and that's kind of what leads me to South Africa. So everything else is clean, and you're probably not going to see it. You may be more inclined to see a little more new oak here and there to get to South Africa than you would to maybe Old World. And because of that, like I said, that cheesier, I want to say Band-Aid because that's not quite as much as here. But,
but kind of farmyardy notes.
But farmyardy notes to your wine kind of can draw you that way.
So from the perspective of an intuitive taster, the way you tell it's South Africa is you smell it and you taste it and it tastes like South Africa. That's the only way I can describe it. I'm like, this one's from South Africa for sure. And it's kind of a weird thing.
It's because it's cooler. Like I said, it's very maritime in nature compared to a lot of New World regions. Like Washington's hot, California for the most part is pretty hot. And Argentina's hot, Australia's hot. It's a little cooler than a lot of those regions. So you'll find more restrained alcohol. You'll find more restrained kind of fruit character, which that can help draw you kind of that way as well. As far as oak goes, you'll taste.
There's a number of factors that kind of can make a wine taste oaky or not oaky. So when I say a wine is like really intensely oaky, it's got character like vanilla, like really intense vanilla or toast or char characters to it. And then the way oak barrels are used in aging of wine can vary dramatically. So to kind of give you the simplified version, you have toasted oak barrels. Those are made by a cooper. You can choose the level of toast that you want, so you can go all the way from like a light char all the way to like they charred it heavily. All of that will impact how the wine integrates in with the oak barrel. Size of oak barrel makes a difference on how much surface contact it has with the wine. Number of new barrels to old barrels. So when you see like 20% new oak, that means 1 in 5 barrels were brand new. The rest of them were used previously. So the more often you use an oak barrel in aging, usually I'd say probably by about the 2nd or 3rd year, it's lost a lot of that character that it's going to give to the wine. So a once used barrel is still going to lend some flavor and some oak characters. Once it's kind of the 3rd, 4th vintage it's been used, it's pretty much called a neutral oak barrel, which means that you'll still get some of that oxygen transfer that an oak barrel can give, which just kind of exposes the wine to air on a micro oxygen level, but not any of the oak or vanilla or char characters that you would kind of expect.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that we've chosen to do in our winemaking style, which kind of deviates from Washington, is that we use about 20 to 25%
Yeah.
So
So
oak in our wine because we want to let the fruit kind of do the talking more than the barrel.
yeah. So and to give you an idea of what wines to taste, that have a lot of new oak. If you're looking for that character, a lot of basically California cabs are kind of known to have a lot of new oak on them.
And there are a lot of Washington producers who do the same.
Totally. I'd say like Gorman is one that I always am like almost overwhelmed by the amount of oak. He does use American oak, which presents a little differently than French oak. And then with white wines, I think the number one example is like California Chardonnay has that super oak forward character to it, which many people
oak tea.
Yeah, don't love.
But our mother does.
I know my
she'll,
wife does.
She'll laugh right now and she'll wave.
Yeah, she's all about it. Just tastes like oak.
There are good examples.
Oak butter.
But that being said, there's a reason we use oak, and oak can add a lot of complexity and really aids in the aging process of especially red wines, and helps soften the tannins much faster than if you were having to leave them in a stainless steel vessel. So
I'm really excited for the winemaker that we're going to have on next time on the 20th. He has some really interesting perspectives on oak. He's from California, and the Father's Watch Red Blend that we're going to be tasting is, I don't know if he did this with the 2017. I only sold the 2016. I didn't have the 2017 when I was at the Wine Trust, but the 2016 was aged in neutral oak for 26 months, which for a wine at the price point that he's moving it at is an incredibly long time to hold that wine. And 26 months is it's called an élevage, and really can be it's crazy to see how much your wine can evolve and change when aged in barrel for that time frame.
Yes, absolutely.
Even a few months can make a really, really interesting difference, but it's pretty incredible for him to be aging a wine like that for 2 years and some change. I don't know if like I said, I don't know if the 2017 is, but I believe that he did do a long élevage on that as well.
Yeah. So Sam is the son of Daniel Barron, and you don't get a much better pedigree than these guys have. His dad worked at some of the really famous chateaus in Bordeaux, as well as Silver Oak and Tommy out in Napa, and they've transferred that really well to their own winery. And Daniel can be a little long-winded, and he won't probably be on the call. But he's one of those guys that I could listen to for hours because he knows everything and everybody, and he's just awesome. But Sam is fun, and
Sam was my first. He was my first visit winemaker, and he came out and we had a blast.
Yeah, I can't.
He's super fun.
He's first on my list to go visit as soon as we're kind of allowed to go back to visiting people. So So the 20th should be a lot of fun, and these last two, I'm really looking forward to these last two. It'll be kind of a fun way to wrap up until maybe we'll go back to doing some of this in the fall. But let everybody enjoy the summer nights
for sure.
So kind of with that, I'll probably wrap it up.
Unless there's any final questions.
We got some busy days. Yeah. So anyways, thank you for listening to us talk about wine. We obviously love talking about wine. Yeah, wine tasting party, definitely.
Yeah, let's do it at the winery.
Yeah, we can do it at we're opening our winery on Sunday, so that'll be terrifying and exciting.
So if any of you guys are interested, shoot us an email.
Yeah, I'll be sending emails out to everybody so you guys can sign up to come hang out with us. But yeah, anybody who wants to do a wine tasting party that's not Washington wine, also happy to do that too.
It doesn't always have to be our wine.
Yep.
We can definitely enjoy some mini, I guess.
Yeah. That's the best part about working for distributors. You have access to a ton of really cool wines. So
Zena, are you talking about the Root Louse Phylloxera? Was that one? Yep. What was the name of the vine disease? Yeah, Phylloxera is the one that's like, it's the vine disease to kind of,
to know.
Really, yeah. If you're gonna know,
it wrecked the wine industry. It left countries not producing. It didn't leave any thing behind it. It took everybody out at some point for the most part. So that's your most famous wine disease by far.
Mm-hmm. It's also really fun to know that Bordeaux and all of those really historical vineyards are not as old as they nearly would have been. At a certain point, vines need to be replanted, but phylloxera moved the timetable up on people a lot because it wiped out vineyards quick, and they had no idea what to do. So replanting a vineyard pretty much takes a minimum of 4 years.
Yeah, maybe. Well, okay, so I'll hit two things here. First, I have to tell you guys that my favorite grape disease is currently Pearce's disease.
We'll never forget that one.
Spread by the glassy wing sharpshooter, which is kind of wrecking Southern California winemaking. But yeah, we can do a wine tasting with a bunch of our wines. If you guys are interested, let me know, and we'll make something happen there.
Let's see.
Carmenere. Well, kind of.
It's a little bit that is a little bit poor ampelography, is I believe how you say it. So before genetic testing, the only way to tell a grape varietal from another grape varietal was to look at the leaves and the vines and the grapes and say with certainty what that grape varietal is.
Which is cool because there's all these great drawings of grapevines and grape clusters that you can match up.
They were pretty accurate, shockingly accurate, to be honest, with what grapes were what. Mostly the reason Carmenere was sort of the lost grape of Bordeaux is because they really legitimately kind of just lost it. They didn't have a whole lot of plantings of it, and they thought that they sent Merlot to Chile. It turns out that the Merlot that they sent to Chile was Carmenere.
They do look a lot alike in their defense.
Very, very similar, and characteristically, they're not worlds apart either. They're related and show it. So yeah, until genetic testing kind of turned up that it actually was Carmenere, they just really didn't realize what they had on their hands. So I think a lot of vineyards, probably if they haven't been genetically tested, have a bunch of stuff in there that they don't know if they're very old.
Especially some of these older world areas, like it's not so common in the US, but like when everybody left Europe post World War II, they took a bunch of vines and took them to Chile or Argentina, or even in Italy or Portugal. Portugal is maybe the best example, actually. They do what's called field blends, and so they just threw everything down in their vineyards, and whatever worked, and that's just what they do to this day. They don't worry about what varietals it was. Carmenere also got lost in Bordeaux because of the climate, and as the climate has warmed, they used to grow Carmenere and they used to grow Petit Bordeaux in Bordeaux, but it's and they didn't ripen. Now they probably would ripen more, so they kind of got booted prematurely out of Bordeaux blends and found homes in Chile and for Petit Bordeaux kind of in Washington.
It's showing more and more old world.
Yeah, that's good wine. That's just... But yeah, so yeah, anybody who wants to taste more wine, just shoot me a text and we'll taste more wine. Pretty simple. And and I'll send an email out to everybody to get people out to taste our wine.
Yeah.
And
for sure. Shoot us an email. Like I said, James and I will provide some more information about tasting at the winery and everything. But I made him put a fire pit in, so we're gonna have some fun and hang out for some of those nice summer evenings. We'll sit out and enjoy some good wine and conversation and friends for sure.
So yeah, so thanks for joining us, and we have I guess a 10-day break or so, and the next one's on the 20th, so not this Saturday but the following Saturday. So have a good weekend, and we'll talk to you guys soon.
Thanks guys. Cheers.
It was a nice wine. I like that one a lot.
It's beautiful.
I was gonna